Hello Mayhem Makers, I'm Mindy with Quilting Mayhem and welcome back to the Beyond Squares Sew Along. We're on week 4 now. Today I'm going to show you how to create the square in the square blocks and the double square in a square block. So by now you should have your center square done and a whole bunch of flying geese and pinwheels. Those are the ones we did last week. So set those aside and today we're going to go on to first the square in the square. So we'll be right back and have the camera kind of facing down so you can see more detail of what's going on. Alright, so for a square in a square block, it's super easy. You have your center square, and then you have 4 squares that are going to be your corners. So this is an easy one. You draw your diagonal line on the back side, wrong side of your fabric if it has one. Of course, we're working with batiks, so you don't notice a right or wrong side, which makes it easy. We're just going to take our lovely friction pen, draw our diagonal lines, and it's going to be as simple as taking it to the machine. So you'll have each square in each corner. I'm going to sew on the line that I drew. I'm going to trim 1/4 inch from that and press it open. So I'm going to take this guy to the machine and I'll be back to show you what it looks like. Alright, so we have our square in our square here. Pretty simple. It's nice that we have our 1/4 inch. So we should have a nice point when we put these blocks together. We won't lose these corners when we sew. And just to do a double check, I'm going to lay my 6.5 inch Creative Grid square on top. And it looks like this block lines up pretty close to perfect. This is close enough, it makes me happy. So that's your square in a square block, pretty easy. The double square in a square block is going to start out the same. So you'll have your center square block, you're going to have your 4 corner blocks, and then there is the 2 extra squares that you're going to have per double square block that it calls for you to cut on the diagonals. So I'm going to prepare these. There's 2 squares here. I'm just going to cut them on the diagonal as the directions tell me to. So we have all our pieces ready. So there's 4 of these that you need for your block. So to start out, the basics of this is, once again, drawing our lines, going to my pink chalk pencil because it's a dark fabric. If you have a wrong side, make sure you're marking on the wrong side of your fabrics, your diagonal, and we're just going to do the same thing again. We're going to sew one of these squares on each corner. Oh, and I didn't show the back. So as you see, I trimmed my 1/4 inch, and if you know me, you know I press open. If you're not pressing open, you're only pressing one direction, I would press to the middle, which is going to be your dark side. Otherwise, follow along like me and press them open. So we're going to mark all our lines. I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm going to sew these on, and then I will be back to show you how to do that double square portion of the block. So that you can see kind of the extra step that this block is going to take for this quilt. So I'm going to head to my machine. So now we have our square in our square, and we're going to add our triangles to make the double square in a square. The easiest way to make sure you get these guys on evenly is you can pin them. So I just fold my triangle in half on the long side, take my square, fold it in half. And once again, as you can tell, I pressed my seams open, trimmed to my 1/4 inch. So you can have your block pinned in the middle, your triangle pinned in the middle, match your pins, and just pin it. And because this is pretty short, I just take it straight to my machine like this and sew my 1/4 inch seam. To start with, I generally do the opposite sides. Now if you don't want to pin, you can kind of finger press. I don't know if you can see that, but I finger pressed my seam. I just squeeze it, and depending on your eyesight, you can match your 2 finger press seams and then just pin that way. So 2 different ways to match. Pick whichever's the easiest for you, and then go to your machine. Sew your 1/4 inch seams on each side, press open. or press to the dark side, whichever is your preference. Just make sure, especially because this is a lighter color, don't press your triangles outward because that dark underneath edge would show through. So make sure that you go either open or towards the inside. So we'll be right back. I'll show you what it looks. So here we have the two sides. I like to go along and trim my little dog ears off before I put the next one on. Kind of lining up my lines here to make sure that these are straight. And then I'll flip it. Line up my lines parallel along these two seams so that when I'm trimming, those are nice and straight. Cut off any little extra. And then you can just repeat. So I'm kind of matching these seams, finding the center of the block, pinning if I can. And then I'm going to find the center of my triangle. Match it up. Pin. Match up those edges and take it to the machine. And I'm just going to repeat for the other side. Matching up my seams. Finger pressing the middle. Making sure those raw edges are matched up. And repeat. I'll take this to the machine and we'll show you what the final block looks like. Alright, so here we have our double square in a square. As you can tell, it's got little dog ears, kind of messy. I'm going to make sure that it is 6.5 like it should be, and as hopefully you can see, it's a little on the extra side, so which is better than being too short, in my opinion. But I'm going to show you how to true this up so it is 6.5. So I'm trying to line up my edges as best as I can, keeping in mind I need 1/4 inch from each point. So what's nice about this Creative Grid ruler is, at least on two sides, it has these dashed 1/4 inch markings. And of course there's 1/4 inch all the way around that you can find, just not quite as pronounced on the opposite sides. So I'm just keeping in mind 1/4 inch from each of these points, trying to keep it evenly centered as best I can. So what's also nice is it does have kind of a bullseye center crosshair in the ruler. So I'm going to try to shimmy it one way and the other, keep it nice and even, and then I'm just going to trim off the little bit of excess, get rid of these dog ears. So I do two sides. I'm not as skilled trying to cut left-handed, so I'm going to rotate. And because I know these two sides are clean, I can now line up my ruler on the bottom and my left-hand side and trim the others. A nice little tip if you're new to using rulers and cutting, hopefully you can tell I've got my fingers kind of splayed all the way around the ruler. These Creative Grid rulers have nice little grippy underneath, so they don't do as much slipping, but just so you can try to make sure you don't have any pivoting or moving as you're cutting, trying to make sure your hand is fully splayed on that ruler, but keep your fingertips of course away from the edges because you don't want to lose some skin in the process. So just trying to keep firmly planted in the center as you're cutting is helpful. So we have it all nice and cleaned up. So we have our big square in the square and then our double square in the square, and that is your homework for this week. Make all those up and get ready for next week. Will be Delectable Mountains. Until then, happy sewing.